want to talk about Lindy West?
No, not really. But I don't want to talk about what is happening with Lindy West and Aham Aluo.
Wait, why are you talking about this?
We've worked with both of them personally, and I'm a big fan of both of them. And that's part of why I don't like talking about this is because I'm a huge fan of their work, and they're really getting drug right now. And so to answer your question, Lindy West, who I've heard characterized in the last few days as probably like one of, if not the most important white feminist of our generation, wrote a book about her and her husband Aham's like path towards polyamory or path to polyamory and being in a throuple with her
Roya?
name, Roya. I have not met her, but I know of her through them in the world. And it's called Adult Braces, and it sounds really interesting, and I'm definitely going to get the book. And I'm a huge fan of Lindy's writing, and she's known to just be like one of the more vulnerable, sharp, confessional writers, especially about the male gaze, especially about sexism, especially about fat phobia and being fat. She's just like a very important thinker. And so when this book came out, I think, well, I don't know what people were assuming, but they jumped on the poly piece really fast and kind of declared that Lindy and Aham were engaging in bad poly, right? Or that the polyamory was dysfunctional and sexist, and here are all the reasons why. And it just has become like this really kind of explosive story.
Was the world even aware of them being poly prior to this?
I think
Like they were out, but I don't know that it's not like every person who had like watched Shrill or like read that book or knew who she was or knew who he was as a musician were like,
No,
you know,
I wouldn't think so.
This was sort of a coming out in some ways of that in terms of her writing.
They came out certainly as poly, and a few years ago, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. I can't remember the outlet, but there was like a video of the three of them in their underwear together talking about how they were in a throuple.
Yeah.
But that was probably a little bit more inside baseball. It was like, you know, they like, all live in the Seattle area.
Yeah.
They're poly, they're queer, they're artists. Like it was people who were of that background would have known about that more so than probably
I just
the
want to
general
pause
audience.
to say I didn't think about it too hard, but I did not like that when that happened either, because I was just like, why are they in their underwear?
The
What is
underwear
this?
thing really bothered me too,
Yeah,
but I didn't
like-
really understand it. Why it
Because
bothered me.
polyamory is automatically associated with underwear, like or like with you know.
Yeah, I
it's just
suppose
like,
it was
what?
like a visual representation of vulnerability and intimacy.
Okay.
But I do think that it read to me a little bit more like we're trying to be scintillating and
for sure.
shocking and like, you know, sort of draw you in from a sex angle. Definitely.
Which I guess like brings for me with this whole what has happened here with this book and the reaction to it, like gives me a tiny bit of pause about just like wanting to be talking about it, basically because of the kind of like scintillating like drama piece of it.
And like big scale poly fail, which everybody always loves.
Right. And that's why, and it's like a great way to, you know, no shade for writing the book that she wrote, but it's a good way to sell a book, or like it's a book that people want to read.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I'm going to just do a few corrections because I've heard people getting this wrong in other podcasts and articles. Aham is non-binary. So just like a note up top to use the right pronouns. And I am realizing that I referred to Aham as Lindy's husband, so partner.
Oh, they're not married. I think they're married.
They are married, but I think probably because Aham is non-binary. It makes more sense to identify that way.
Gotcha.
So anyway, I'm just saying that up top
Spouse.
because people have been getting a lot of
Spouse.
stuff wrong in that department, and I want to be accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there is nothing this world likes more than seeing a polyamorous relationship fail in some way, or seeing cracks in it, or exposing those cracks. And so my absolute first instinct with this was, a little bit, this might be a tempest in a teapot.
Like
You know,
over.
it might just be like a bunch of people who have like a specific interest in this getting all frothy about it.
Yeah.
And then maybe my second reaction was, oh, this is where like the mainstream gets to shit on poly, which everybody loves to do because they're just sitting around waiting to show how this is like an impossible type of relationship to have.
Right. Yes.
And then maybe I've had a more nuanced third reaction in the last couple of days, but why don't I start with those two things and just like, what comes up for you two when I say this, like, you know, shitting on poly opportunity comes around and everybody jumps on the bandwagon. What do you notice about that? Do you think I'm overstating it?
No, I don't think you are. I mean, I delved into this just like the littlest bit, and like I started reading this article, and that was in like Harper's Bazaar, and I'm trying to find. It contains like in the one of the first paragraphs, the third paragraph, it says. When people have negative reactions to polyamorous relationships like those in adult braces, it's understandable. If you've had any experience with an open relationship, it was probably bad.
Wow.
And I'm just like, that is a fucking super editorial.
That's just a statement of fact.
It's just a statement of fact in this article. And like,
so many people sent me that. So many people sent me that who I know are very polyskeptical.
and I stopped reading the article because I was so pissed when I read that, because I'm just like, what other thing would you be able to like editorially drag to that extent with like, you know, just
no
like
correction.
Carte blanche, no correction, no.
Yeah.
Maybe later in the article there's some kind of like hedge on it or whatever, but like you would never.
No, you
can't.
Know. No.
And like, you know, if you've had any encounters with monogamy, it was probably fucking.
Well, that's what I said. Was like, if you've had any encounters with relationships, they were probably bad.
Right.
If you had any encounters with, you know, dating people who have gender privilege, it was probably bad. And that is to say, there is this just like hyper-focused lens on polyamory and non-monogamy in the same way there is on queer relationships, where you're just like holding them to this like perfection standard that you absolutely do not hold more traditional relationships to. Which is maybe a good segue into what the fuck happened. Like, what are we actually talking about?
Can I just say before you do that, I know we need to talk about what the fuck actually happened, but it just reminds me of like, you know, when anybody with a marginalized identity does anything in the world, then like the mainstream attributes it to their marginalized identity. Like when there's a mass shooter who happens to be trans, then it's because they're trans, and it's never when, you know, husband murders his wife in a monogamous relationship, like happens 1,000 times a day in this country. It's not because they're monogamous.
Okay,
right?
This is a really good segue into what I think all of those things actually are because of, which is toxic masculinity, which is what happened here too.
Okay.
Right?
So.
Patriarchy and toxic masculinity create these conditions over and over again, and we would prefer to look at identity instead of that systemic problem. And I think that is a bit of what is happening in this case. So thank you for that segue. Here's what happened. Two people got together. They're brilliant, wonderful, important thinkers and doers in the world. They fell in love. And it was an issue early on that Aham identified as non-monogamous or polyamorous. I don't know which one. And Lindy was skeptical. Or actually, I think in the beginning, Lindy was like, no, I'm not. Right? And they broke up over this issue. And I don't know that I have like the timeline exactly right. So that's a caveat in place. I have not read the book yet. I just became aware of it last week when everybody else started talking about this. It seems like maybe they broke up because Aham cheated in some way. And Lindy was told about it by someone who caught them. And so they broke up, and it was like, we're incompatible because of this. But then it was really hard being apart. They really missed the relationship. They lived their partnership. They wanted to try again. And they got back together again and got married under the conditions that they would not be activating polyamory or even actively talking about it, but that someday down the line, they could, right? It wasn't permanently off the table, but it wasn't on the table right now. And then apparently tried to broach the topic a number of times. Lindy was like, no, I'm not game.
Mm-hmm.
Right? No, not yet, kind of. And then, but the just sort of knowing that Aham wanted to do this made Lindy feel really insecure. And it created a lot of like intense kind of like codependence in their relationship, where she felt like she was always just trying to be like kind of perfect and prove her value as a partner so that Aham wouldn't even want to. Right. So there's like a lot of pressure on the relationship around this, even though they're not operationalizing anything. Right. And then Aham cheats again. And Lindy finds out again from someone that sees them making out with somebody.
Right.
And then it's like pretty quickly revealed that there's an established relationship, and Aham is like, well, I told you this was going to happen, that I was going to cheat if we didn't go non-monogamous. And Lindy really struggles with this. Aham pretty quickly is like, throws themselves into this relationship, goes to Portland to support this person through a difficult time. Lindy is like tossed in the air with all of this, goes on a long road trip by herself, and through that process kind of writes this book about undoing codependence and her own insecurities and self-esteem, and, you know, how she kind of like eventually makes her way into polyamory. And partly that story is about her getting involved with Roya as well, and them becoming a throuple. So that's like the arc of what happened. And of course, there's like ins and outs inside of that, but I think those are the major plot points. Is that what you understand the plot points to be, Jess?
Yeah.
And this is all in the book, just to clarify.
Right.
So we were talking
Yeah.
about these people's intimate relationships and their feelings and shit because it's written in a book for public consumption.
That's right.
Okay,
Correct.
Yes.
cool.
Yes.
Yeah, because Lindy
Gotcha,
West
yeah.
is incredible at writing about her feelings and being super, super vulnerable and talking about this stuff. You know, putting it into a book that I can't wait to read.
And that people, I mean, also to Lindy's infinite credit, boy, can she touch a soft spot. Like, boy, can she like get right in there on what is going to get a big emotional reaction, which is going to be like tough topics, and write the hell out of it.
Yeah.
You know? Which is what she has done yet again. Clearly.
Yeah. So, but then there's some stuff that has happened subsequently to the book coming out that feels...
So just to pause here before we kind of like get into the nitty gritty of it all, what do you all notice about that story? Like, just from a polyamorous perspective, from the perspective of a podcast that like talks about polyamory and its many mistakes and joys. What, you know, I laid this out for you. Here's the story. What comes up for you?
Well, it sounds super fucking messy, obviously, which is fine, because these things are messy. And I guess it sounds, you know, it has some poly under duress vibes. And I guess you sort of gestured towards the point of the book being her like resolution around that. But like, clearly she's like not a willing participant.
It's certainly in the beginning. Yeah.
In the beginning. And
what does poly under duress mean? That's like a term that the community uses, but
yeah, that you want to be in a relationship with an individual person enough that you're willing to like do polyamory or have some, you know, have some kind of non-traditional relationship structure because that is a requirement of being in that relationship with them. But you don't want to be doing it. You're doing it under duress. It's kind of a bad term because I would argue that all poly is under duress.
Yeah, all relationships are under duress.
Being alive under
but...
capitalism and patriarchy is living under duress.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, that's what it feels like. And it feels like, especially based on the story you told, that like there were many times that she was like, I don't want this. And then he was like, you have to do this to be with me. And then she was like, okay, well, I want to be with you enough.
Yeah.
That I do, which is like a choice that a person can make, but there's a I guess a reason that is like a alarm bells term kind of in the poly community or for poly people, because ideally we have this lifestyle because it like works for us, and then our partners are sort of like almost incidental to that, or like this is where we start is, you know, as a person who's poly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, what comes up for me is that it sounds really familiar. So a lot of people who are talking about this, and what I hope to do in us talking about it is to reframe the conversation a little bit, not to like rehash the same one I've heard a number of times. A lot of people talking about this are not polyamorous.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what I was reacting to up top is they fucking suck about talking about it.
Sound kind of ignorant.
Yeah.
And so it sounds really familiar to me as someone who is polyamorous and therapizes the polyamorous community. It is not uncommon that people move from monogamy to polyamory with one person leading the charge and the other person highly skeptical. And it often, unfortunately, is a conversation that is sparked by some kind of infidelity. You know,
And like worth noting that is
what
true
happened
for
with
us.
us.
Yeah.
Right? So first and foremost, I'm just like, yeah, does that suck? Is it pretty common? Also, So it strikes me as like a little disingenuous for everyone to be like, oh, what? You know, like this was the dynamic. I'm like,
poly people to be like that. Yeah, because it's a very common.
Yeah, it's really common. Also, infidelity is really common in monogamous relationships. So I just want to like normalize both of those things as well and say like, infidelity is really common and lots of people stay with people through infidelity. In fact, it's more common that people stay through infidelity than that they leave. And so I want to acknowledge that the tone here is like, how could this incredible feminist stay with this person through these infidelities, compromise her, values and boundaries in order to be with a man? And I just want to, be like, all right, calm down, everybody. Like, first of all, yeah, that's happening a lot. And it's happening among feminists, and it's happening in monogamy,
First
and
of
it's happening
all,
in non-monogamy.
what's the dumbest thing you've ever done in a relationship?
Right, exactly. So there's like a tenor to this that feels like disingenuous and kind of gleeful and like a little bit dishonest that I don't appreciate. And that's one of the reframes that I want to do.
Well, and I'm finding myself like wanting to kind of disambiguate or argue with like the way that it mirrors our experience, but it's also true that were you to dramatize, if somebody wrote the like dramatized version of our experience, that's what they would come up with.
Right. And it's even worse because it's like the infidelity started happening, which is like an emotional infidelity, started happening when I was like pregnant. So then I was like really in a position where I couldn't leave, because I had become so like vulnerable.
God, what an asshole.
Economically and physically. And so like, yeah, that's not a flattering story to my feminism if you tell it from that angle. No. So I just want to be, I guess, vulnerable myself about that. And that like my first gut reaction was just like, oh, fuck, Lindy, I'm sorry. Like I know what you're going through, and that also your experience and ability to like change and struggle is just really flattened by people's need for you to be a certain way.
Right.
And I think that again is really a characteristic of the way this culture treats women who write about their intimate lives. That you like are held to the standard of like, you have to be so consistent and you have to be like so thick skinned and you have to be there's like this kind of perfect requirement for that you just cannot meet. And it's like you like all this vulnerability, but not if it's vulnerability that shows that she is just as susceptible to sexism and misogyny and the low self-esteem and challenges that come with it as anybody.
Not to get to like meta media analysis about it, but it's also true that like once you present your personal life for public consumption like that, you have kind of ceased to be a person and you have become like the symbolic representation of everything that you say that you are or people perceive you to be. So in that sense, it is like being sort of like mean to her or like critiquing her. Like people are critiquing, what she has made herself to represent.
Yes.
And which is meaningful and like they're understand I just want to say it's not like mean of them to do that kind of because she has like voluntarily opened herself up to that.
Sure. But I think it is fair to point out double standards in that department and hypocrisies and how if we value people opening up to us vulnerably about these incredibly like intimate experiences and power dynamics inside of our lives and intimate lives, then we have to allow there to be room for people to make mistakes and to change and, all of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, and I'm just thinking, like, I haven't made a study of this, so it's just a vibe, but it feels like this reception is very different than the media reception of, like, More by Molly Rodden Winters, right?
How so?
Like, I feel like that was all just, like, pretty breathless coverage of polyamory. Like, wow, what is this thing that the Brooklyn literati are doing, right?
Okay, I got some takes.
Interesting, yeah.
I got some big takes.
Yeah, those people were kind of shitting the bed in the way that they approached that, or there was some real...
Well, first of all, I think the big takes that I have are what I recall from that book. Tell me if I'm getting any of the facts wrong. Both people were white.
Yes.
So I think there's that. Neither people were queer.
Nope.
So I think there's that.
Oh, yeah, yes. There was a line in that book that convinced me that straight women do actually exist. Amazing.
Well, it was good for that anyway.
Sorry.
Amazing.
From an anthropological perspective.
I love that.
I want you to find out what that line was and put it in the show
I
notes.
know what
what was it?
I mean, I don't remember exactly what she's talking about, like having a threesome with a man and a woman, and how she was like really grossed out by the woman's breast, just like kept thinking about breast milk and was like really disturbed by interacting with breasts and could only think about them as related to nursing.
Unbelievable.
It was like, boobs? Boobs?
You can't sexualize boobs?
Everybody loves boobs. Like,
wow.
I don't want to shame anybody's sexuality.
Okay, that's too straight. That's too straight.
What is happening?
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's so straight that it's roundabout queer, actually.
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
maybe. It's true. It's true. She
I'm like, maybe she's a gay man.
Yes, exactly.
That could be.
That's the only possible explanation for this that I can...
And I feel like even lots of gay men are like fans of titties and at least, can appreciate... Anyways,
a good titty.
Okay.
Great tangent. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. So, Aham and Lindy are a mixed race couple. Right. They're both queer. One of them is non-binary.
Right.
But here's the real kicker, I think, is that they've been making it work.
Right.
And I think that everybody loves a story of, in More, the husband is a cad. Right. So there's a good person and a bad person. And the marriage ends because the polyamory is a fail. Right?
Oh, doesn't yeah.
So you're saying people are having a big reaction to this because they're like...
They live together.
Get out of that relationship.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to be happy in this like non-traditional way because we are stuck over here.
Or to be unhappy in this non-traditional way.
Right.
Like monogamous people are allowed to be fucking unhappy and nobody's like, you better not be monogamous.
Everybody's like, well, marriage is hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Oh my God.
So I just think there's a lot of double standards. There's a lot of hypocrisy. I think I wanted to hop on the mic, and I appreciate you all doing this more, not because I wanted to like get to the bottom of this, but because I felt desperate for a reframe of the conversation where we're actually acknowledging some of these inconsistencies in the cultural responses. And there's stuff that like makes me uncomfortable about it that I think does reveal why, beyond just shitting on Polly, people might have hopped on this as passionately and emphatically as they have. And one of those things is, again, I haven't read the book, and so there's only so much I can really offer here. But what it sounds like is that Lindy takes a long, complex arc to get okay with polyamory, recognize her codependence and her failings and the ways she wasn't the partner that she wanted to be and becoming the partner that she wanted to be. And like this really kind of like deep dive internal journey. No surprise there. And Aham is just like, yep, glad you did that. So I don't know if that's actually true, but that's the way it's being characterized. And I think that if there is truth to that, there is something uncomfortable in it. That there is a kind of pressure in polyamory, I think, for folks who are like experiencing the most anxiety about it to just go and fix themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't appreciate that. I don't like it. And I don't think it's fair or correct. I think often those people are femmes. And I don't think that's fair or correct.
Yeah.
Especially because I don't think it takes into account that as a general rule, femmes and women and people socialized as women have more trauma around intimate relationships and sex and, you know, their bodies and misogyny.
Yeah.
So like they are going to come to the table with more of that, and to have partners who have not had that experience just be like, wow, you're a lot. Why can't I just go and sleep with a
Right.
bunch of people? Why are you having such a big feeling about it? You know, and also in Lindy's case, she's written so much about fatness and
Right.
body shame and,
Yeah.
you know, that it doesn't feel, this doesn't feel kind, and it doesn't feel collaborative in the way that you might hope it would.
Yeah.
Of course, Aham can write their own book.
Right. I'm looking forward to
Or-
Aham's memoir.
Compose a jazz live
A really cool
musical
jazz
show,
live musical about it because they're an
experimental
incredible
avant-garde.
musician.
Stand-up special.
Yeah.
Also.
You know, so I think there's that, and I think that mirrors the experience of a lot of women, in particular in polyamory,
Yeah.
where they're like anxious. This activates trauma. Their male partners are like, tough shit, babe. I'm going to Portland because this other lady needs me now, you know? And you're like, okay, yeah, I just need to work on my insecurity. I'll just, you know, pour thousands and thousands of dollars into therapy, and I'll do like MDMA trips, and I'll like try and figure it all out, and I'll make myself perfect for you, which is, again, this just like misogynistic traumatizing, where it's like, if you could just be perfect, if you could be the down girl, if you could be everything, then you wouldn't be left by a man. So that sucks.
Yeah.
That blows. And I think that's one of the reasons why it has upset people.
Or why it's upset you.
It was upset me. And also just like the low expectations for men, masked people, or people socialized as men to do the same amount of emotional labor,
Yeah.
or give up any of their gender privilege as a way of trying to address how patriarchy and toxic masculinity shows up in their relationships. Like, are they ever willing to just not fucking do something because it's going to put this, you know, person that they love through hell? And I think too often the experience is, no, they're not willing to give that up. And I think that that reinforces the kind of low self-esteem that women often have, and their feelings of being disposable and infinitely replaceable, and that their feelings don't really matter and are mostly crazy. So I think that it, you know, it touched a nerve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm of two minds about that part, because I just also just feel like, you know, it's a valid take, and it's also
Thanks.
so hard to ask people to do that, or expect that people will do that.
Right.
And you can say, like, expect men to do that, but it's, you know, it kind of boils down to power in some ways to me, like that, like asking the person with more power, or expecting the person with more power to move towards the person with less power, is like it's a good, like, value, or a good thing to hope for, and it doesn't happen very fucking often. And
No.
like the like 40 years ago parallel to this or whatever would be just him cheating on her and being like, are you gonna take away the whole poly context, and like he has somebody else that he wants to fuck or have a relationship with, and he hides it and she knows, and then, you know, they have conflict over it, and then he's like, yeah, well, I'm gonna do it anyway, and, you know,
You can stay with me or not,
You can
but
stay
good
with
luck
me or
getting a
not.
credit card.
right, sure.
I mean, like, I am
Yeah.
joking, but this stuff is so fucking real and so
Yeah.
deeply embedded in the power dynamics between especially men and women. And that one of the reasons why this is a little challenging to talk about is because these dynamics have a lot to do with gender, and also Aham is non-binary, you know, so there's like this kind of,
I mean, that's where you start talking about
Yeah.
how people, or what gender people were socialized as,
Yeah.
or whatever. But maybe it doesn't matter. Like,
I think it does. I think it does, that gender privilege is there, even if you identify as non-binary. I think what also is getting under people's skin about this is we on the left want to believe that people are willing to step towards each other, give away privilege, in
Right,
an
because
effort
that's our
to
like solution to the problems of the world is if the people in power would just do that,
Yeah.
or if people willing to do that would just be in power, then. But then you see that play out on the interpersonal level, and it's very
right. And if
hard
there
to
were
do.
ever two people, certainly here in Seattle, who were like really important, I think, symbols of the left,
Yeah.
and of an intimate relationship on the left. And it's like mixed race, it's feminist, it's creative, it's out loud. So like you want to believe if it could happen anywhere, it could happen there. And I think what this reveals
Yeah.
is like, well, maybe they have some of the same problems, and that's like hard for us to swallow.
I mean, we would be remiss not to acknowledge how this kind of thing shows up in our relationship too. And I
Totally.
can't think of, I mean, I can think of ways that I have like compromised the things that I wanted to do out of care for you, definitely. But it's not like a super common practice, or it's not like I wouldn't say that it defines the expression of our polyamory.
Right. Well, and it's really tough for women and femmes to ask for that or even feel grounded in being able to ask for that, because then you get cheated on.
Right.
I mean, I think historically we're just like, we
Yes.
ask for a man to give something up in favor of this like privilege that they have. And then they're like, okay, I'll hide it and betray you.
Because we're over here being like, oh, I'm supposed to accept myself. Okay, how do I do that? That's so fucking hard. Okay, I'm doing it. And then I'm hearing that the version of myself that I'm trying to accept and that I have all this shame around is hurtful to you.
Yeah.
And it's much easier to just be like, let's not have that conflict. I'll just hide it.
Yeah. And so like a lot of this work, it circles back to where is Aham in all of this and what has their journey looked like. And I think I have not made the granular deep dive on this that others have, but I really did want to talk about it because it just like hits so close to home for us, our dynamics, our city, our community. Like I felt like we had to like just talk about it a little bit. I am really eager to hear Aham talk about their own journey in this vulnerably. And so far, a lot, of course, what's on the internet is them being defensive, which
like they're responding to people criticizing their character in the book, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that doesn't help because, of course, that's like the expectation that people have is that the more masked person or the man is going to be defensive instead of actually take accountability. So we're just like in the same spiral, but this time with folks that really we had hoped were an example of how you could be outside of the spiral.
It's weird for that to all be happening in the context of the response to a book, too.
Oh, yeah.
Because usually when that's happening, it's like sexual assault allegations or like some kind of scandal that kind of comes out on accident. And this is like totally predictable, right? And
that is one thing that I think, again, I don't know much about how Aham is feeling about this, but one of the things they did say is they were like, I have read every copy of this book. I've been involved in it. I know what's in there. And so, to me, that does speak to them hopefully recognizing that they have an arc here too and some accountability. It's just like that piece hasn't fallen into place. I guess.
Yeah. You would kind of think that they would have written their statement about it ahead of time or whatever. And I don't know what I would do in that position. And it's not that hard of a position to imagine being in, given that you're a writer who like writes about yourself and your own experience. But it's not easy. What do you want people? What do you think people should think about this?
I think.
What do you want people to take away from?
It's the thing I always want people to be thinking about, which is power dynamics and being accountable to them and making sure that you're actually like talking about that instead of the red herring.
Right.
That polyamory is not the problem here.
Right. Yes.
No.
Yeah.
It's polyamory is a style of relationship.
I actually forgot we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
polyamory is a style of
You're absolutely
relationship,
right.
and all relationships are challenging and problematic. And you wanted to go into any relationship or any relationship style and find evidence of how it is doomed. I'll take you there. I will
Right.
take you there and we will find it, because this is one of the hardest things that we do, especially in the context of the culture and lives that we live right now. Don't talk about this like it's a polyamory problem.
Yeah, and people's phobia of polyamory, or in this case, is probably derived a lot from like their phobia of having to interrogate power dynamics. And it's more comfortable to be like, there's a person or a couple over there who's monogamous, and we know what their power dynamics are, and we can kind of look at it,
Yeah.
and they're not that complicated, or they're not changing, or
Yeah.
whatever. And in polyamory, they're always changing, and they're more complicated, and so it's less comfortable. It's more uncomfortable, and we have to think about like, you know, Aham was socialized as a man or as non-binary, and Lindy is a woman, and Aham is black, and Lindy is white, and
They're both queer.
Well, they're both queer, and you know, Lindy is fat, and Aham is, you know, has a desirable body,
A typically smaller body,
and like the other partner is this way and that way, and like all of these different dynamics that are like really fucking complicated and make people uncomfortable. And like, honestly,
and so isn't it easier to just be like, polyamory is doomed, instead of engaging with all of those different pieces?
Yeah. And like making people engage with those different pieces is Lindy West's career.
Exactly.
And I think that's why when I saw that she was doing this book, I was inside a little bit like, fuck. And then, because I was like, I kind of was like, this is going to be bad. And then I tried to get her to be on the podcast, which didn't work so far, but
invitation's still open.
Yeah.
The other thing that I want people to be thinking about here, which is the other thing I'm always wanting people to think about, is can we let ourselves change? Like, can we...
Oh, you mean change from being uncomfortable with poly and to being
no,
comfortable
just
with it,
like
in her case?
We change, relationships change, Lindy West changes, Aham changes. Like, we don't have to be like calcified as one thing. And if nothing else, I hear that this is a story where Lindy is talking about change.
Right.
What it feels like to change internally, what it feels like to change inside of a relationship. I know that that has been expressed imperfectly, or maybe it hasn't been expressed imperfectly. It just has revealed things that make people uncomfortable. But that is kind of the point of writing and non-traditional relationships and all of that. But the third thing I want people to think about is unfair power dynamics show up in intimate relationships.
Yeah.
Toxic masculinity and patriarchy show up in intimate relationships. I would argue there are no exceptions to that, and it's the hardest thing for us to talk about. That is what we should be talking about here, right?
Yeah.
That's the piece that is like really interesting and important.
Yeah.
It's not who's good and who's bad. It's not that polyamory is doomed. It's not that Lindy owed us something else, right?
Yeah.
It's that. And like, we can all see ourselves in that. And I think the more we can normalize seeing ourselves in that, the more of a shot we have at actually some liberation there. So
yeah. And it's almost like polyamory is like another character in the story about that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for indulging me on that one, Alex. I really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for listening. And if you have thoughts about this, I'd love to hear them, because it feels like a conversation that has kind of caught fire. So that usually means that there's a reason for it. Okay, bye.